don't fall in love with your metrics. Don't measure everything. Be aware that you need to track how stuff goes, but don't fall in love with anything you measure, because there's a big danger there. The economists called it Goodhart's law.
Welcome. And I'm even going to say bienvenue today, because it is the start of season 3 of AfternoonT, and I am super excited. I mean, really, really, really excited, because we have a great guest to start out the show today with Philippe Beaudoin. Philippe, before we get into this, let me read all about a little introduction, if you please. Philippe Beaudoin is a venture scientist, constantly looking for ideas that can improve society. In 2020, he co-founded Waverly, where he and his team are building a discovery engine for our increasingly diverse social and content landscapes. Waverly relies on natural language and empathic AI to let users connect with their true aspirations. Before that, in 2016, Philippe co-founded Element AI, a world leader in enterprise AI. Philippe holds a Ph.D. from the University of Montreal, was a researcher at the University of British Columbia, and spent the last 20 years honing his technical and leadership skills, including half a decade at Google. Philippe, thank you so much. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks a lot.
It is honestly very exciting to be speaking with you. So first off, you go from speaking with lonely old me right to doing a TED Talk tonight. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about what are you going to talk about there?
Yeah, it's a TEDx talk, so I think it's the little broader. But yeah, super fun stuff. I'm doing that at the Collège Brébeuf here in Montreal, and I'm going to be talking about algorithms, especially how it affects students these days. They're everywhere, and and maybe more interestingly, how can we build them better, which is what Waverly is all about, actually.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to learn more. Well, you just led me right into that. Tell me, what's the origin story of Waverly then?
It's a long story. When I was at Google, which was 6-7 years ago now, I used to work on Google Chrome, and Google Chrome has this front page. Whenever you open it, you get there, and it presents a bunch of things like the most visited links and stuff like that. But we really conceived it as a recommendation system. What should we recommend people who open Chrome? And as I started building that, natural questions emerged, like, hey, what do we measure in order to decide what to put there? And the more I looked into these questions, the more I realized that, whoa, we had a lot of power. Whatever we put there gets clicked like 100 more times than things that we wouldn't put there. And it just made me realize how important these questions were. But at the same time, I had no idea how to do this differently. The way these things work essentially is they measure how you behave when you use the software. They have an objective in mind, increase the number of clicks or keep you on the app as long as possible. And then they take actions in order to achieve that objective. And these actions are, what do I put up there on the screen? What do I put in your news feed if you're talking Facebook and things like that? And at that point, I was like, this is going to lead us down a pretty bad path, because right now what we're looking at, what we're measuring, is very shallow. It's a very shallow representation of who people are. If we keep down that path, we'll end up somewhere bad. And I think the year since then gave me proved me right. If you look at what Facebook has, the issues with social media and the last elections in the US, but it's everywhere. You see it everywhere. And so, I think 2 years ago, since I had been doing a lot more AI through Element AI, I realized that there might be a different way of doing these things. Essentially, instead of looking at how people behave when they use the app, we could start asking them, how would you like a recommendation engine to behave? Or what would you like it to do? And because AI has advanced so much in natural language understanding, we could take these answers and build custom algorithms, custom recommendation system based on what people say they want. So that's how Waverly started. I decided this would be my next my next adventure after Element AI, and there I was. I launched it, found a really great founding team, raised a bit of pre-seed money, and we've been building that for the last year and a half.
Well, very exciting, very exciting. So how many people is on the founding team, like the core founders?
Yeah, there's three of us.
Okay.
There's Michael Kronish, who was a VP at Vice. There's Philippe Beaudoin, who spent 20 years at Ubisoft, acting as a CTO, and myself with the AI chops and just
Very
doing
cool.
the rounds, shaking hands, that kind of stuff.
So it's a very senior team. So you're doing the technical and the business. Like how does that break up between the three of you? The
Yeah,
roles in the
so
company.
I do a bit of the technical, a bit of the business, a lot of
Mhm.
the AI. Phil Gagnon is like 100% technical, and Michael Kronish helps on the business side. With we have a lot of relationships with more traditional media, and
Mhm.
so that's where he comes in.
Oh, that's really exciting. And you said he was with Vice before?
Yeah, he was with Vice. He
Wow.
spent a long time as a VP with Vice,
Mhm.
which was a very interesting story. He grew super big, super fast, and then yeah, it became very dependent on how algorithms work. Right? That's one of the problem with these businesses. If Facebook or YouTube changes their algorithm overnight, boom, your content plummets or something changes. Yeah,
Oh, the strength of the big
it's
players, right?
crazy.
Well, one thing that I kind of touched on in the description, I love in your description how you described yourself, or how that described yourself as a venture scientist looking for ideas that can improve society. Tell me, what's a venture scientist and how do they improve society?
Oh yeah, it's. I fell in love with that term too. I like that you're pointing it out. I heard it from Um, it's an incubator in the UK, and it's essentially an incubator that tries to take scientists out of universities and introduce them to entrepreneurship. And it fit me so well. And they're using that term venture scientist. And when I heard it, I was like, yes, this is exactly me. I'd been searching, like, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm not like a pure scientist. And I really like that term because I've been bouncing between academia and being a researcher and being an entrepreneur all my life.
Mhm.
And I felt that both of these sides of me, they combine well. They bring strength to one another. As a scientist, I think, I can analyze stuff and I'm good with the advances in technology. And as an entrepreneur, I can push them forward and turn them into products that people actually really want. So
Mhm.
that's how I'm like, yep, this is me. And I guess what is interesting about entrepreneurship for me is really the uh, innovation aspect, right? I have to be building something that doesn't exist yet in order to
Mm.
find that fulfilling. And since I'm building something that doesn't exist, like I might as well be doing it for the greater good. That's my driving force. That's
I love
why
that.
that's why I'm in that. And yeah, it takes a lot of energy. I'm sure you know, right? It takes a lot of energy to get up every day and build something that no one has seen before, and to fight all the forces that go against that. Um, and if I don't have that inner fire of knowing that I'm going to help maybe my kids, maybe like people out there who struggle with their digital life, help
Mhm.
them have a better life, I don't think I would have the strength required in order to do all of that.
I love it, and I can tell already you have a nuclear power energy reactor inside you, just the same as me. I can tell, so that's good. And you know what I mean? This is kind of like algorithms for good. I mean, you could maybe say with Waverly that's kind of the feel too, right? Like we can do good, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of interested because you went from University of Montreal and UBC. We'll talk about, and then did you go straight from there to Google?
Uh, Actually, that's where I can say I bounced. I did
Hmm.
like a master degree, then I worked in as a industrial researcher and in video game industry. Then I went back to do a PhD. Then
Hmm.
during my PhD, I worked as a consultant because some open source project I did became very popular.
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, I'm going to become a prof. That was my idea,
Wow.
going to find a
Hmm.
job in a university, and I couldn't. Then I'm like, okay, well, in that case, I'm going to go to Google. And it took me a while, but I got in and loved it. It's a great place for a technologist like myself to learn about how the best things are built.
Mm.
I'm not sure I would like it that much today. It has changed a lot since I was there, but yeah, it was a really good place to be. But for me, it was essentially a place to be while I waited to find the next entrepreneurial stuff. Exactly. And for me, it was Element AI and now Waverly.
Fantastic. Well, when you were with Google, does Google have a Montreal office?
Yeah, it's very small. Well, now it's grown a bit. It was very, very small back then. I had been in Vancouver for 3 years, and I had young kids. I wanted to come back for them to be close to their grandparents and all of that.
Sure.
And yeah, that's why.
Very cool. Well, I mean, when you go from academia to Google, you kind of like, I've done Google's campuses. I've had the tours down the valley in New York, other places. It feels like a campus. Like it has that university feel. True. When you said, Element AI or one of the next, like Waverly, do you try to go for that feel, or is it too expensive to keep that up? Because that is a very expensive thing to contain. Yeah,
you're right. It's like a university campus, but with free food, which is, this is how they get them out. You just put free food out there, and they all come flocking. Yeah, it's a very expensive thing to build. I was at Element AI. We definitely tried to do a bit of that. I think it's rooted in this belief that if you go for the very, very best talent, you can build something that is significantly different than any of your competitors. And that's how Google believes, for sure. And I think all of the big tech companies think like that. And by building these crazy campuses there, it's part of the package they offer. And, especially back in the days when they built it was one of the most requested feature. It was easy to get people when you had that. With Element AI, we tried to do a bit of that. We felt that there was this shortage in talent in AI, and we wanted to create the kind of environment that would draw these people in. But it is very expensive. It's very hard to sustain as a startup. It has to be a huge part of your strategy. So I would say with Waverly, it's the good old startup route, right? It's the good old product-based startup. As well, I think, I'm all for experimenting different models, right? I think the crazy growth of Element AI had advantages and drawbacks, but at least it was experimenting with something. But with Waverly, what we're experimenting with is a product itself. It's not, how do you build such a product? And yeah, so we are in a garage, very few of us. We all have our laptops and 100% cloud. It works really well. And truth be told, the team is happy, and they are because they feel they're working on an important problem.
I dig it. I mean, that core team. I mean, when you have a good core team, it doesn't matter. As long as you guys are all together, communicating and working really well together, you don't need a big campus. You just need the tools to get your job done and done right. Well, you know what? I just want to step back because I'm very intrigued because obviously, University of Montreal in Montreal, AI is, it's one of the world centers. Toronto, Montreal, you guys are fighting as capitals of the world in AI, in my belief, which is a real honor for let's put the Canadian flag down and say that's amazing. Yeah. And I love it. But UBC, my stomping grounds, not quite known for the AI side of things. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to come out here?
Well, you know what? Back in the days, AI just didn't work. It just nobody was talking about it. It was a classic AI winter. In Montreal, I took Yosha Benjo's class. I was a good friend with him during my grad school years here. And I was a good friend with him because there were 5 of us in his class. It's crazy to imagine that today, but there were I don't know, I'm making this up, but there were very few of us in his grad class. People didn't think that neural networks worked. They thought it was some facetious idea inspired by the brain, and the real serious AI people were doing real maths. But I love neural networks, and to me, I was like, hey, maybe these things will eventually work. And it was almost like a fairy dream, to say, hey, these brain-inspired machines are going to eventually be a thing through which real AI comes. But when I actually didn't study directly in AI. I studied in computer graphics. My thing was, how do you get simulated robots to walk on 2 legs? without falling on their face in a physical environment. So it's a hard problem. There is definitely some AI in it, but it's, I didn't need to be in Montreal to do that. My postdoc advisor, researcher I worked with, was at UBC, super solid guy, and it's Vancouver. It's so nice. I had spent a summer there during my PhD, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life there. Only ended up spending 3 years, but it was a very, very good decision, both from the scientific standpoint. UBC is very solid. And when you hear about these AI wars between Montreal and Toronto and UBC being left out, the truth is there are very, very solid researchers in AI in all the big campuses. So I would hire someone who graduated from UBC in AI overnight. The quality
How about someone who graduated in history and Russian? Because then maybe I've got it.
Well, send your resume. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I'm unemployable. That's why I had to found my own company. And you know what? There might be a lesson there to those who find themselves unemployable. Then you know what? Start your own thing. That's what that worked for me. Well, I was expecting. So I used to be the president of the UBC Ski Club. Okay, and there were so many postdocs who were there just to ski. So that's kind of what I was expecting the answer to be. Was like, oh, it's good to study, but yeah, you got the mountains, But
maybe we skied together. I was totally doing that. I was going on the hills after the work day. It's so nice.
Yeah. What year were you at UBC?
I should have looked it up.
Speaking of resumes.
Yeah, speaking of resumes, I will say around 2010.
Okay.
Plus or minus 2 years.
Who's counting?
Exactly.
So, well, you talked about Joshua Benjo, okay, about meeting him in your class. But what inspired you to start working together? Can you tell me about how that all started out?
Absolutely. So, yeah, like I always stayed in touch with Joshua. When I was at Google, I reached out to him. I was working on machine learning at Google itself, so we were always talking. And when I decided to go out of Google, I was like, okay, I'm ready for another venture or another starting a company. But I didn't want to start my own at that point. I was like, oh, let me find something out there that fits my my vision and my values. And Joshua is definitely a person who, like, we have a lot of shared values. I mean, everything he does on the academic side, he does with the best intentions. He really wants to help the world. And so I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, I think we connect on this. Any big project you're aware of? And he pointed me to Element AI, which was just it was just a seed. There was almost nothing, but there were Jean-François Gagné, Nicolas Chapadas, and Anne Martel who were working on it. And I joined the three of them. It wasn't Element AI. It was like company number XYZ. And we basically started shaping it. What would it be? How would it benefit from this rise and the success of neural networks? And yeah, the rest is history.
Well, I did a little bit of research, and it seemed like you guys were doing everything at Element AI. Like it was. That's why I kind of talked about that Google campus feel, because it did look like you're doing everything. What was the main focus that you were working on there?
Yeah, it definitely looked like that, didn't it? It was one of our challenges, right? It was like, okay, we know that the latest advances in AI are going to have impact in the industry, in a bunch of different industries. We know there will be some backing layers to all of that, some infrastructure that is going to be different than our classic infrastructure, classic cloud or classic database systems that will be needed. And we wanted to find it. We had some ideas. Every neural network system has what's called an underlying representation of the world. We felt that these representations would become the key thing that people would exchange or would build their systems on. And we wanted to become the representation store. Okay, so how you would go to Element AI and you would get all of that. So we seeked out to build something like this through a bunch of these partnerships and these projects with different partners. So yeah, it was. But yeah, I would say what you see there is a company looking. What you saw back then was a company looking for product market fit. How do you find product market fit in that world? And it's you see it at a smaller scale in every startup out there. It's just that we raised a lot of money and we had the ability to deploy a crazy accelerated growth strategy thanks to that.
Did you know? So I saw you were in Montreal, and was it Korea? Was the other? What cities were you in?
We were in Montreal, Toronto. Mm-hmm. We were in Korea and Singapore, and I think that's it. We had a London office. I was in charge of it, so I should remember.
that small little city somewhere over in the UK. Yeah. Well, what made you decide to go into these foreign cities?
Opportunities for us. It was mostly like we had really good partners in these different places, and we went there for that.
So it wasn't talent. It was on the corporate business side, or.
Definitely a mix of both. For example, London has crazy talent in AI, so it was definitely part of our reasoning there.
Makes sense. So ServiceNow, which is a very large company, acquired Element AI. And can you tell me, like, I love these acquisition agent stories because I always like to know how the relationship started. Like, did you work with them prior and have this relationship, or did it just come out of the blue? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to it very much because I was already I had a small role as a scientific advisor at Element AI for a year before the transaction happened. So I didn't know anything about it. I learned it at the same time as you did, as everybody else.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was less involved in there, so I can't speak to it at all, actually.
Fair enough then. Well, then let's just say, you know what? It's nice that ServiceNow, saw the great value in it, and it's I understand the talent is just world class. So I totally dig that.
That I can speak to. I mean, the people we have, like I worked with there, I would work with them again any day.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. Couple years ago, there was this great video I saw. It was out of the UK about AI, and it was comparing the world's AI. And it's talking about China, it's talking about Russia, it's talking about the States, and then it talked about the special forces, and that's when it talked about the Canadian players. And I had no idea at that time. I mean, it was in the infancy. I mean, 2015, 2016. It's just the neural networks are really just starting to realize, as you said, hey, this works, and it works really well. And I just to hear some of these names and to know that not only are you one of them, but playing with them, it must be a real honor to be part of that whole, power system, let's just say. Well, tell me, what was the biggest lesson learned from Element AI then? Yeah,
for me, it was, I think I thrive in the kind of like product-driven startup, right? I'm as an entrepreneur, I'm definitely a product person. I care about building something people really, really want, connecting to my users. Why do you like it? What do you not like about it? What do you not like about it? Let's talk product. And that was my biggest lesson is, if I like, that's how I should build my next company. As I was saying at the beginning, I think the strategy of Element AI made a lot of sense because the talent was so rare and it was the move needed. But I'm definitely a product driven founder.
Well, I think that's so interesting because I mean, with the algorithms and everything, it's you're still asking your customers, what do you think? Is this good? Like testing the assumptions as opposed to, hey, algorithms, just get better and figure out what the person is. So is the algorithm more important? Is the user more important?
Well, first time I get that question, but it's a really, really good one. The way algorithms are built today, I would say you still have to go to the person because it takes such a shallow perspective of who you are. it looks at your clicks, at the speed at which you scroll, at a bunch of things that are very weak at defining you. Mm-hmm. So you still have to go back to the people and ask them, what do you actually really want? And that's why you see these products popping up all the time, these new products, these new platforms. They answer a problem that the algorithm itself wasn't able to solve. But that's actually what Waverly is about. It's about, okay, if these algorithms are bad at understanding what we really want, can we build different algorithms that are better at that? And our answer is maybe, but if we do this, we will need two things. First, we will need a way for people to express what they want, which is for us natural language. And two, we will need to accept that our products have more friction in them than traditional products. Because the current way in which you build product, you never ask the user anything. And anytime you ask a user to stop and think is a moment at which you could drop your app. That's how most product designers think. But the problem with that is, how are they going to stop, think, and tell you what they really want if you don't give them the space for this? So at the core of Waverly, there is this concept that friction isn't inherently bad. You have to use it well at the right moment. You have to ask questions and to base your answers on that. But we take the view that trying to to eliminate all of the friction is going to lead to products that understand their users in a very shallow way.
I love that. I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to explain to customers or our clients, because we make software, but I try to explain to them that doing prototyping is so important, because you're testing assumptions before you're committing zeros and ones. And it's so much easier to pivot there. And so, even in the algorithm world, it's really important, I suppose, to test out those assumptions in a kind of like a low definition or lo-fi way of doing it. Get the assumptions and then resource in and build up. That's a fair assumption in that?
Yes, I think that's what we're realizing also, right? We started the first version of Waverly. In order to do anything with it, you had to write 3 paragraphs in order to describe. And our algorithm was crunching all of this and understanding what you expressed. But users were like, what? I don't get anything out of your app until I've written these 3 paragraphs that describe why I'm really, really passionate about golf. And yep, that's how it works. And so the response was nah, maybe not, right? And this is how where we realized that we needed something a bit like rapid prototyping inside Waverly. We need to be able to give people something, even if they don't start right away with this very long paragraph. We call them waves, when these long paragraphs that describe your experience. So, we went back to the drawing board, and the new version of Waverly feels a lot more you onboard it like any app. You don't have to write anything. You start, but slowly it draws you in. And eventually you're like, hey, maybe I could spend some time to express what I want, design my own algorithm, my own wave inside of Waverly. I draw a lot of parallel with the process you describe of, telling your customer, we could build a full app, but it will be the wrong app and it will cost you that much.
Yeah. Well, we met at a C100 event, a virtual one. Unfortunately, I can't wait to get back down to one of either the San Francisco or New York or even London. I mean, they're really doubling down on multiple places. How does the C100 for you fit into your goals?
It's for me, it's a super good initiative to connect the Canadian tech ecosystem to the Valley, right? Mm-hmm. I know the vibe there. When I was at Google, I used to spend a couple of months a year there every year, and it's hard being away from that and building the kind of tech company that aspires to transform the way we build almost all the platforms we have out there. So it was super important for me to feel that I'm building a company that is connected to that pulse. And I think that C100 does a really good job at connecting, at keeping Canadian entrepreneur connected to the pulse of the Valley.
Do you do the same thing I do with I've done a bunch of events prior to the pandemic and also, part of the Slack channel, the secret Slack channel, you see my quotes and all that. And, with each new person that comes on there, I just do this. Wow, they're Canadian too. Wow, I'm connected to this person. and you reach out and they're really happy to be part of the group. I mean, I should actually say for the C100, I mean, the original vision, I should probably describe what that is so we're not using our own internal talk here.
That's right.
The C100, originally the vision was for the 100 top executives in the United States or the Valley who are Canadian, who can, help out other Canadian companies, especially young startups that are trying to blossom and move into the Valley. Because the original model was, of course, you build a product, you get some traction, you take investment, you move to the Valley. Yeah. And this was a body, and they had their 48 hours in the Valley, which I've been a part of. I not as a product, but as an observer, and it's honestly fantastic to see the energy of helping and everything, and the good intentions. But it's definitely expanded. And I think it's also come to a realization, and this is something that, is just obvious now. You don't need to be in the Valley. Like, back in the day, when you took that money and you had to move to the Valley, and you didn't have a choice. I'll use Grammarly as, like, people don't know Grammarly is a Canadian company, for example, originally out of Toronto, but they had to move to the Valley. That was about 7 years ago. But now you can stay in Montreal. You can stay in Vancouver. You have a whole support network around you. And in fact, it might be easier because the talent's cheaper and just as good, if not better, because immigration is so much easier. Yeah. So, that whole C100 spirit is super alive. But I just can't wait to, we'll cheers, a beer or whatever it is soon, I hope. Together.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think you can build an amazing tech company outside of that. And I think I'm meeting VCs very regularly who believe the same, right? Actually, some of them, like you said, think that it's easier to build a great tech startup because you can find outside of the Valley, because you can find talent more easily, great talent more easily. Totally agree with that. We don't have, we're not planning on moving there. So let's build great Canadian company. But I think what the Valley got right is this ethos of, great technology companies are built by great technologists. You have the respect for that. And that's, and then they have this crazy network of investors and all of that you need to be connected to.
Completely. But I would almost say, besides the network of investors, which I think, with digital connections now, we can still form those relationships. I think, personal is still super important. But I still think the Valley's a philosophy. And I think that philosophy has infected other cities now, and they want to be like it, but with their own flavor. And I think that, I'm not going to look down on you. I'm going to question what you're doing and be curious. And I'm going to support you. I might not make money off it. I'm not going to be this competitive person because I want to see you win. And I think that's what we have in Canada, because it's an energy of support, which I love.
I really like how you describe it. And sometimes, I live through this clash of worlds where I meet some investor from a different world, right? Who doesn't share that philosophy. And for me, it's just a big clash. It feels like, oh, wait, we're in this crazy, I don't know, like this winner takes all mindset instead of this collaborative mindset. And like, oh, I'm not used to that anymore. That's not how, and the Valley philosophy works. Yeah.
Do you know one of the best lessons I ever had in business? And it's such a funny thing because my dad used to work for Air Canada. And he handled a lot of the tour companies. And when the first SARS outbreak broke out, I just happened to be having dinner with him and one of his client partners in Chinatown in Vancouver, one of the big restaurants. And as we're eating, he all of a sudden said, "I just have 5-10 minutes of a meeting. I just have to do it." And next thing I know, he's sitting at a table, and it's all the other Asian-focused travel agencies, and they all just got together, which is hyper competitive. And SARS obviously created massive problems in travel between Asia and Canada. And he said, "Well, you know what? We all just decided. It took us 10 minutes. We all decided that I'm going to close my shop for a week. He's going to close it the next week. They are going to close it the next week, and we're not going to compete with each other. We're all going to survive through this." And I was still in university, and it just made me go, "Yeah, you know what? Let's be frenemies. Let's support each other so that we get through this. We all have families. You know what? Oh, I took $200 out of their pocket, over a week by doing it. No one wins that way." And that was like my big aha moment in business, where I thought, "No, we can be supportive. We can all win together." So I'm glad I went to that dinner, and I'm pretty sure the hot and sour soup was darn good too. Well, you know what? I mean, I've got an AI expert here, so I got to ask one question, and this is off the table, but like, you know, off the level of question. If I got to ask, do we have to be afraid of the robots, or when do we have to be afraid of the killer robots?
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, two things. I'm one of the, like, despite the fact that I'm in AI, I'm one of the probably most skeptic AI expert out there. But second thing, I'm very often wrong.
Oh no, please don't be.
So I'm very often. You remember when AlphaGo beat the Korean Go master?
Yeah.
I was at Google back then, and Google was had acquired DeepMind, and it was a DeepMind rope. Like AlphaGo was a DeepMind product, and I bet against my boss, and I told him, nah. The guy is going to win. The robot is going to lose. And it's like, yeah, I lost money that day. I was betting against my employer. See, that's, you know, so I'm very often wrong. But I still highly doubt that we have to fear the robots with the current generation of AI. My reason is, you know, it's simple, and everybody's going to give you a different answer. But I think that whenever we find something in AI, something new that works, we always think it's the last. It's finally we found the last straw. It's the last thing we needed in order to build a system that has the flexibility of human brains. Don't get me wrong. I think we will build such a system. I don't think there's nothing special or in the human brain that cannot be reproduced in a machine. But I think we are being very naive whenever we find something at thinking this is the last big thing that we were missing. And right now, I guess what we've done is able to accomplish really, really powerful tasks that we weren't able to do before, recognizing objects, speaking with the voice of a human, things like that. But it's still lacking in a very important aspect, which is they're really bad at generalizing. You can train a system to be really good at Go. It won't be able to play chess at all, right? Humans are not like that. And we've been, like, as researchers, we've been trying to make progress on the front of generalization for the last 10 years since deep learning started to work. And we've made some progress, but it feels like we're still missing something. So my hunch is we'll need to find something else before we can reach what scientists call AGI, artificial general intelligence. But it's just a hunch. You ask Demis Hassabis at DeepMind, he will tell you that no way, we're like 3 years away from AGI. So it depends on who you ask.
Well, I won't bet with you then. How about that? We'll just leave that one off the table.
Leave it like that.
Well, one thing I've been reading about is some nations these days are actually nationalizing algorithms. Like they're actually saying, no, we can't export it. Is that something we should be looking at, or is that like totally go against the grain of science?
Yeah, I have an issue. Like, yeah, I think you're nailing it. For me, I think we're better off sharing what we find as scientists, at least, for the fundamental research aspect. For sure, there will be geopolitical issues with it. I'm not necessarily confident enough or competent enough to talk about how we should handle that. But I feel like if you are too harsh, or you're just like stopping any collaboration, you'll be worse off in the long run, because you won't benefit from what's going on outside.
Yeah, I agree. A network in isolation is not a network. No one benefits from it. You know what? Can you share this? The theme again of Afternoon Tea is to talk to wonderful entrepreneurs like yourself, Canadian ones, in order to expedite that next generation of Canadian startups. So can you share maybe a Canadian entrepreneurial star or founder that you look up to, or that you think you need to know about, or that we, the listener, needs to know about?
There are a bunch of people I could give as example, but I'd like to give the name of a very small startup I interacted with last year when I was doing Founder Fuel. It's called Galea. The CEO is Guillaume Parent. And what Galea is trying to do, which is a fascinating idea, they're trying to to take art that random people do everywhere. Like there's a lot of people who love to paint and love to do art, and they want to make it live more instead of like you just giving it to your mother or keeping it in your basement. They're trying to get it out there. So post it in coffee shops, and so they're building this app and this network of people who want to like to post their art. And I just like the vibe of that company and the energy of Guillaume when he talks about his mission and what he's trying to accomplish. And for me, it's just it really is what maybe some people call the creator economy could be about, like empowering these people who have a really strong passion to live that passion more and in a more fulfilling way. So super inspiring Canadian startup, feels very Canadian in its values and the way it does things. So yeah, you might want to check out Galea.
Galea, and it's Guillaume Perron?
Guillaume Perron.
Perfect. When I was going to University of Laval, I lived in Pavilion Perron. So I guess that's a very common and a good name then.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, you've done a journey, Google, Element AI, Waverly, and all the university years in between. Can you share one piece of advice for that, for that Canadian founder, the young Canadian founder?
Yes. You've heard all of the advice. Okay, that's my first thing. If you're a founder, you've heard a lot of the advice, but there is one. You've heard that you should measure things, you should but there's one that I think I give that few people give, is don't fall in love with your metrics. Don't measure everything. Be aware that you need to track how stuff goes, but don't fall in love with anything you measure, because there's a big danger there. The economists call it Goodhart's law. And the problem with it is, as soon as you measure something and you start to incentivize it because you feel it's connected to what you want to eventually accomplish, the connection drops and it becomes the wrong thing to optimize for. So it happened to me a bunch of times through my career. At Google, we optimized for clicks on links, and eventually people invented clickbait, and this didn't work anymore. But if you were in love with the metric, you could be blind to the fact that it's stuck to be the right thing to measure. So I would say my advice to you is measure everything, but don't fall in love with what you measure. Go back to the drawing board regularly, and that's probably how you can build a great product-centric business.
That is fantastic advice. You know what? For the first episode of season 3, I think we got the golden advice for the year already, and it just started. So, hey, Philippe, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so much fun. J'espère que la prochaine fois, on fera l'interview en français.
Ça me ferait plaisir, Chris. Je t'inviterai peut-être sur mon podcast.
You'll see that I've been living in Western Canada for way too long.
That's all right.
But it's definitely, everything in Montreal is in my heart. And, I look forward to, hopefully, I can have a tea with you over there at some point, because I'd really enjoy that. But thank you for joining us today and for sharing, all of your journey and lessons and learnings. And they're really of value to the listeners. So I really appreciate everything you've done with us today.
You're very welcome, Chris. Thanks for having me.